If you give the marshmallow test to a 2-year-old, I guarantee you she will fail. If you give it to a 9-year-old, I am almost certain she will succeed. I am not saying that self-control will come naturally in time, even some adults struggle. But it is important to take age into account when you set your expectations. And that is because the part of the brain that is responsible for planning and complex decision-making is the last one to develop. The prefrontal cortex is actually only finished at around 25 years old, so keep that in mind when you have teenagers. But why is it that kids the same age have widely different results in the marshmallow test? Every time you use your self-control, for instance, you make the decision to turn off Netflix despite the cliffhanger at the end, your brain is physically changed a little. The neural pathways that are associated with self-control are strengthened. Next time you need to use your self-control, it will be a bit easier. That is true for adults, but it is even more the case for young children. Because their brain is a lot more plastic, practicing the self-control has a bigger impact on their brain circuitry. And the stronger these brain connections, the easier it gets. So how can you give your kid opportunities to practice self-control and build those neural pathways? Children learn a lot by imitating adults. So verbalize your actions and tell him when you need to use your own self-control. For instance, I don't want to cook right now. I would rather play with you. But if I cook now, I'll be so happy later when we're hungry and we can eat a delicious meal together. You can start doing that even before you expect your child to do the same. That way, you're slowly introducing him to the concept of delayed gratification. Next, you can introduce rules and limits. If your kid loves dogs and tends to run towards them in the street, you might tell him that before petting an animal, he should first ask if it's okay. Every time your child delays the greeting, he practices self-control and makes those brain connections stronger. The younger the child, the simpler the rules should be. Remember, their brain is not the same as yours. And also remember that these neural pathways are built through practice, so if she's forced to do something, it does not build self-control. There needs to be a choice and a decision from the toddler for that area of the brain to be activated. And there are plenty of moments when that is not possible, especially when safety is at stake. Like in the car, one needs to stay safely seated with the security belt on. That is not negotiable. So it is important to take all the other opportunities to practice self-control. When you're walking in the street and there are a lot of people, you might ask your child to hold your hand. And that's practice. It takes some self-control to not run off at the first distraction. But I know people who worry a lot about safety and who prefer to keep a leash on their toddler when they go shopping. It is not a simple topic, but if you are weighing the pros and cons, know that at least when it comes to self-control and learning to control impulses, a leash is absolutely terrible. So self-control is learned through practice, but there's a trick that can also help. In the marshmallow test, the kids that just stared at the candy were a lot more likely to end up giving up and eating it. Teach your kids that they can distract themselves when they feel impatient. Sometimes you get hungry before the meal is ready. If you stare at the pan, salivating, you will probably end up picking pieces of food from it. But if you drink a glass of water and unload the dishwasher, you distract yourself enough to wait for dinner time. Again, tell your child what you're doing and why. So to recap, teach by being an example, speak about your own self-control efforts and distraction hacks, and have simple, consistent, and achievable limits. For most families, that's it. But there is one more component that is a lot more fundamental, and hopefully you're already doing it intuitively. In 2012, a group of researchers revisited the marshmallow test and twisted it. Before the experiment started, the kids played for a while with the researcher. There were crayons and papers. She said she was going to go get a bigger set of art supply and asked them to wait. For about half of the children, she came back with it and they were delighted. For the other half, she came back empty-handed, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. We actually don't have the set of art supply I told you about." Understandably, the kids were quite upset. After a while, the same researcher said that it was time for a snack, and the marshmallow test began. So what do you think happened? Well, most of the kids who did not receive the art supply ate the marshmallow. Some ate it right away, but many actually tried to wait. On average, those in the first group with the reliable adult waited 4 times longer. That's an insane difference. The temptation to eat the marshmallow is hard for every kid. But for those who were not sure whether they could trust the adult, the balance was tipped towards eating the treat. And this is relevant outside of the marshmallow test. Put yourself in the shoes of a toddler. Your parents and caregivers are essentially your window to the world. You explore and discover it through them. If the adults in your life tend to change the rules whenever it's convenient or don't keep their promises, you would conclude that the world is generally not a reliable place. But remember, a child's brain is shaped by his experiences. So go back in the toddler shoes and imagine that you're constantly feeling cheated. Later, when you're at school and a trustworthy teacher tells you that if you focus on finishing your exercise, you can go play. Would you believe him? Part of you will probably expect it to be a lie. You know, just to save yourself from being cheated again. And even if you do try your best to focus, when it starts to be difficult, that part of you will tell you, what's the point, and make you give up. So, practicing self-control is important, as well as having age-appropriate expectations. But if your child really struggles with it, ask yourself whether something in her life makes her feel that the world is not a reliable place. Talking with your child about it can help a lot. But if it doesn't feel like it's enough, don't hesitate to seek counseling. It is too important to wait it out.